Okay. Good morning, our respected teachers, speaker, and all my dear friends. I am Anushka Rai, student of BSc second year, MMV BHU. First of all, I would like to quote here a famous line by Maria Robinson. Nobody can go back and start a new beginning, but anyone can start today and make a new ending. Friends, many times in our life, we are confused about which career option is best for us and what path should we follow to achieve our dreams. At the end, we find ourselves stuck in dilemma and lots of confusions. But as Tina author said, you just have to have the guidance to lead you in the direction until you can do it yourself. Likewise, we also need a proper guidance to discover the roads not taken and realize our dreams. So, in today's program, we are going to talk about a very interesting but lesser known career option. Having said that, let me introduce you to today's speaker, Ms. Akshita Singh. Akshita ma'am has completed her BSc Honours in Physics from MMV BHU itself and MSc from Institute of Science BHU with Solid State Physics as a specialization. She has also completed an internship from IIT BHU in her graduation. Right now, she is a PhD scholar at Center of Nanotechnology, IIT Roorkee, under the guidance of Professor Vimal Chandra Srivastava. I'm thankful to Akshita ma'am for accepting our request and giving us time from her busy schedule. I'm also thankful to Neelam Srivastava ma'am for organizing this program. I assure you that you will certainly take away some valuable lessons from this program. So now, let's begin the event by paying homage to great Indian educator, honorable founder of BHU, and Mahamana Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya. I hope my screen is visible. Now, without delaying much, I would like to invite Akshita ma'am for delivering her lecture and share her experience with us.
A very good morning to everyone. Thank you, Anushka, for your kind words. I hope you all are doing well. So, before starting the session, I would like to thank Neelam ma'am for providing me this opportunity where I can share my till now experience as well as introduce my juniors to the basics of the field I'm currently working in. So, ma'am, you have always been an inspiration to me. You always try your level best for understanding and guiding your students so that they can develop their interest in the chosen field, actually, the field of basic science. So, today I will introduce you to one such interdisciplinary field, that is nanoscale science and nanotechnology. Let me begin. So, let me begin. Sorry for the delay. I have been fortunate enough to have worked under Professor Owen Srivastav sir in my dissertation project, which was based on this. Since I understand it will be a new concept, most of you it has not been part of your course till now. Keeping this in mind, I chose this presentation to be very simple so that you can comprehend much easily. Let's begin. Nanoscale science and technology. It would be very unfair if I don't start with this line. Historically, it was on 29 December 1959 at the annual meeting of the American Physical Society, when for the first time nanotechnology was formally recognized as a viable field of research, with a landmark lecture delivered by Feynman, the famous Nobel laureate physicist. His lecture was entitled, "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom, an invitation to enter the new field of physics." He stated in his lecture that the entire Encyclopedia Britannica could be put on the tip of a needle. Can you believe it? In his talk, Feynman also described how the laws of nature do not limit our ability to work at the molecular level, atom by atom. Actually, instead, he said it was our lack of appropriate equipment and techniques for doing so. Now, so here's the outline that I would be following. First of all, some basic introduction about nano, its application, what the significance of nanoscale. Then we will move towards a particular portion, a kind of nano material that is a quantum dots. Its synthesis, experimental techniques used for its characterization. So, actually, what is nano? What does this word actually mean? Well, in science and technology, the prefix nano is used in units of measure. Usually a length scale. As an example, 1 nanometer is a human strand. Here, a single strand of human hair is about 100 micrometers or about 1 lakh nanometers. So you can just imagine how small it is. Or we can also say, in other words, 1 nanometer translates to a thickness from a few to around atoms. You will get inside of that used for the reference. So, Nabor Science was published in 2004 by the Royal Society. It states the study of phenomena and manipulation of materials at atomic, molecular, and macromolecular scales, where properties differ significantly from those at a larger scale. Interestingly, no scale unit are while explaining significance of nanoscale again. So, what is nanotechnology? Again, this definition is provided by the Royal Society, which defines nanotechnologies as the design, characterization, production, and application of structures, devices, and systems by controlling shape and size at the nanometer scale. So here it includes the application part of nanoscience. Then what is the significance of nanoscale? Now you all must be thinking that why all this hype? What's their scale? Science and technology is based that at the nanoscale, new properties of at a larger, macroscopic, or everyday scale. So why nanoscale has become so important, I have listed a few here. Firstly, quantum mechanics. By nanoscale design of materials, it is possible to vary micro and macroscopic properties have charge capacity, magnetization, melting temperature, and that too without changing their chemical composition. Isn't it nice? Significance of nanoscale. Now you all must be thinking, why all this hype? What's there so special about it? Actually, to tell you, the essence of nanoscale science and technology is based on the fact that at the nanoscale, new properties of materials arise as compared to those observed at the larger or macroscopic or everyday scale. There can be many reasons why nanoscale has become so important. I have listed a few here. Firstly, quantum mechanical, or we can say wave like properties of electrons inside matter are influenced by variations on the nanoscale. By nanoscale design of materials, it is possible to vary micro and macroscopic properties. Examples we have such as charge capacity, magnetization, melting temperature, and that too without changing their chemical composition. And the next, let's see the second. Due to an important feature of biological entities, it is the systematic organization of matter on the nanoscale. And thus, developments in nanoscience and technology have allowed us to place man made nanoscale things inside living cells. So, it proves to be beneficial in medical field also. It also has made it possible to study micro and macro structures of materials, which is a certainly powerful tool in material science. Another feature in nanoscale components have very high surface to volume ratio, and this property makes them ideal for use in reacting system. Since more the surface area, more will be the free energy and more the reactivity. It can be used in drug delivery systems, such as in case of cancer diagnosis and treatment. It can be used in energy storage, be it in solar energy, hydrogen energy, or even supercapacitors for the electrode material. Now, also macroscopic systems that are made up of nanostructures have much higher density than those made up of microstructures. So, even they can be better conductors of electricity, which means it can result in smaller and faster circuits and more sophisticated functions. These are some major applications of nanoscale. First, medicine and healthcare. Nanoscale science and engineering approaches and tools can be used to diagnose or treat diseases. Quantum dots and gold and silver nanoparticles can be used as probes for biosensors. Nanoparticles, as I already told you, can be used for targeted drug delivery. And in energy science, as we can see, development of efficient lighting approaches, photovoltaics using nanocrystals or quantum dot, nano-driven improvement of energy capacity. Or we can also use nanomaterials as alternatives to conventional battery electrodes or supercapacitors. Another application is environmental remediation. So, nanowires and carbon nanotubes can be used for environmental sensing. Uh, we have NEMS, nano electromechanical systems, that can be used for the on site measurement of contaminants water bodies. Nanofiltration has the potential to provide solutions to the problem of poor water quality. Then, one application we have in electronics, as I mentioned earlier, it can result in faster and more sophisticated functions of the circuits. It is also used in food processing and packaging, also as nanofertilizers, nanopesticides in agriculture. In textile industry, it is used for antimicrobial, water repellent, and UV blocking property. Also in paints and cosmetics, these properties, as I mentioned, in textile, these are beneficial in paints and cosmetics industries also. In defense and security, it can be used for chemical and biological sensors, nanorobots, and nuclear detection. Now let's have a look on the classification of nanomaterials. So first is zero-dimensional nanomaterials. Nanomaterials with all external dimensions at the nanoscale may be classified as zero-dimensional. The most common representation of zero-dimensional nanomaterials are nanoparticles. This includes quantum dots, which are semiconductor nanocrystals that act as potential well and are used in electronics to confine electrons and holes. Then hollow spheres, for example, of carbon, that is fullerene, you all know. Full spheres like of titanium dioxide. Cubes we have of palladium. Rings can be from zinc oxide. So the zero-dimensional nanomaterials can be used individually or, for example, in solution as an emulsifier, or they can be used within a solid matrix as a reinforcement filler. Now we have two external dimensions at the nanoscale. The third one is usually at the macro scale. Then it comes under 1D nanomaterials. This difference in material dimensions leads to the needle-like shaped nanomaterials as you can see in the figure. Then this includes nanofibers, nanotubes, nanowires, and nanorods. Nanofibers can be formed as a web for filtration applications. Nanotubes display a peculiar hollow cylindrical crystalline shape with atoms organized as pentagons, hexagons, or even sometimes heptagons. And carbon nanotubes are much in use these days. Nanowires have the largest aspect ratio of 1D nanomaterials, and the nanowires can be used to confine electrons. Now, proceeding towards the next, we have two-dimensional nanomaterials. So, what is it? With only one external dimension at the nanoscale, 2D nanomaterials exhibit plate-like shapes and comprise thin films, nanocoatings, and nanoplates. Thin film consists of ceramic or metallic coatings. They can be used to manufacture electronic components with insulating or conducting surface properties. Then polymers and composites are used to produce nanocoatings with the objective to improve the hardness or the resistance to abrasion or corrosion. Last one we have is three-dimensional nanomaterials, which is also known as bulk nanomaterials. These are materials that are not confined to the nanoscale in any dimension. These materials are thus characterized by having three arbitrary dimensions above 100 nanometer. You can certainly ask why these materials are called nanomaterials at all. Well, they can be any of the two reasons for it. First, despite their nanoscale dimension, these materials possess a nanocrystalline structure. Or second, it involves the presence of features at the nanoscale. Now, what does it mean? In terms of nanocrystalline structure, bulk nanomaterials can be composed of a multiple arrangement of nano-sized crystal, mostly in different orientations. And what was the second point? With respect to the presence of features at the nanoscale, 3D nanomaterials can contain dispersions of nanoparticles, bundles of nanowires, and nanotubes, as well as we can sometimes have multi-nano layers. So these features allow them to be categorized under the three-dimensional nanomaterials. Now, moving towards quantum dots. What is it? Now we will be focusing on one of the zero-dimensional nanostructure, that is quantum dots. So a quantum dot is a semiconductor nanostructure that confines the motion of a conduction band electrons, valence band holes, or excitons. What are excitons? They are the bound pairs of conduction band electrons and valence band holes. So this confinement should be in all three spatial directions in the case of quantum dot. In other way, we can also say that quantum dots are those semiconductor nanoparticles whose dimension is comparable to the exciton Bohr radius. Let me mention, exciton Bohr radius varies from the material to material. So we have to decide what's the dimension and what is the exciton Bohr radius of that sample that we are synthesizing. Then we can say whether it will be under quantum dot or it will be just a nanoparticle. So quantum dots are also sometimes referred as artificial atoms. Why? Because these materials exhibit discrete electronic states, as we can see in atoms and molecules, and that is why they are also called as artificial atoms. Now, one of the properties, that is optoelectronic properties of the quantum dot, is very important. It is determined by the size and shape and alter as a function of these variables. The smaller the nanoparticle forming quantum dot, the higher the energy difference between the valence and the conduction band, which results in a deeper blue color. You can see in the diagram that as we are decreasing the size, band gap is increasing. And this is a special property of quantum dots. For a larger nanoparticle quantum dot, The energy difference between the valence band and the conduction band is low, which shifts the glow towards red. Now let's move towards the synthesis part. There can be many methods to synthesize this, but here we have used hydrothermal method for the synthesis of quantum dots. This involves crystallization of inorganic salts from aqueous solution, and that is controlled by pressure and temperature. Why means what is the principle behind it? Actually, the solubility of inorganic compounds typically decreases as the temperature or pressure, even sometimes both of them is lowered. It depends on the compound at how much temperature and pressure we need. And this decrease in solubility leads to the formation of crystalline precipitates. By changing pressure, temperature, then reaction, or sometimes the aging time and reactants, different shapes and size of the quantum dots can be achieved. Let's look at the procedure that I have followed. So we first prepare two solutions. Solution A is having titanium isopropoxide and isopropanol, which is stirred for 2 hours. Solution B is containing isopropanol, double distilled water, and oleic acid, stirred for 2 hours. Here, what is TTIP? It is an alkoxide of titanium, which is used in organic synthesis. And oleic acid, solution B, here is used as a ligand. And what the function of the ligand? It is to prevent agglomeration of nanoparticles. Because if we don't use, the nanoparticles formed during the reaction will agglomerate and they will be beyond their size limit. So to prevent that, we have to use a natural surfactant or ligand, which is here oleic acid is functioning as. Now, solution B was added dropwise into the mixed solution A, and the resulting solution was then vigorously stirred for about 10 hours, and the yellow semi-transparent sol was produced. The obtained sol gel was then hydrothermalized in an autoclave at a temperature 120 degrees Celsius for 24 hours. These all parameters actually they depend on what material we are preparing. Only the basic idea that okay we are using an alkoxide and the ligand and double distilled water for hydrothermal. Only these things are common in the synthesis, but these temperature, time, and quantity these all varies according to what we are going to prepare. Then the resulting slurry was washed with isopropanol and double distilled water for several times, and then it was dried at 80 degrees Celsius for 24 hours. And finally, we obtained white dry powder, which is titanium TiO2 quantum dots. Now, it's the time for band gap determination. Because as I told you earlier that quantum dots have different, actually higher band gap corresponding to their bulk structure. Let's verify this by using the UV visible spectroscopy. So the UV visible diffuse reflectance spectra DRS is recorded by using UV visible spectrophotometer in the range 300 to 800 nanometer, that is UV visible. At first, the percentage of reflectance measured by the DRS data is converted to the absorption coefficient values. Because as you can see, what the plot states, it is between the absorption coefficient and then the band gap. And what we obtain from the DRS data is the percentage of reflectance. So we have to convert it into the values of absorption coefficient. And then we use the top plot, as I have mentioned this equation here, alpha h nu equals to A, Eg minus h nu to the power n. And what is this equation? It actually states here alpha is the absorption coefficient of the sample. A is just a constant. H nu is the incident photon energy that we are choosing in the range of 300 to 800 nanometer. And N. N is also a constant, but it depends, its value depends on whether our material is having a direct band gap or an indirect band gap. Now, what is a direct band gap and indirect band gap semiconductor? So, sorry. When we have the common wave vector for the highest value of the valence band and the lowest value of the conduction band. And the transition is a direct transition. That is, there is no involvement of any momentum transfer. Then we categorize in indirect band gap. And for indirect band gap, we have a different values of the wave vector corresponding to the maximum of the valence band and the minimum of the conduction band. There, other than the energy h nu, we also there involves a momentum transfer between them. So it's very dependent on this. We have this equation which is plotted here. Then to determine the band gap of the sample, the converted curves is fitted by a Boltzmann sigmoidal equation, and the band gap value is obtained by the x-axis intercept. As you can see here, this x-axis intercept of the line tangent to the inflection point of the curve. The band gap energy of TiO2 quantum dot was found to be 3.5 electron volt. This value of band gap is in conformity with the known values of the band gap of TiO2 quantum dots. Thus, the as synthesized material corresponds to TiO2 quantum dots. Let me mention the band gap of the bulk TiO2 is 3.2 electron volt, which is lower than what we have obtained in the case of quantum dot. And this was what I was talking about when I was mentioning the optoelectronic properties of quantum dots. So band gap increases as we decrease the size. Then moving forward, we now have X-ray diffraction technique. This technique is based on the principle of Bragg diffraction, and it is used for the analysis of microstructure, phase formation, lattice parameter, and textures. Now the question is, what is Bragg's law? Maybe some of you already are aware of it, but here I'll give you a brief intro for those who are not aware. Actually, Lau in 1912 discovered that crystalline substances act as three-dimensional diffraction gratings for X-ray wavelengths. So these X-rays are generated by a cathode ray tube. Then they are filtered out to produce the monochromatic radiation. Then they collimated to concentrate and directed towards the sample. The interaction of the incident rays with the sample produces constructive interference and a diffracted ray when the conditions satisfy Bragg's law, that is n lambda equals to 2d sine theta. These are the incident rays here. These are the planes of a crystal, and these are the incident rays. Then diffracted rays. As you can see, there is a path difference between these two rays. And how much it is? It is equals to this value, that is 2d sine theta. And when this difference is equal to n lambda, we have a constructive interference. That we all know. So this law relates the wavelength of the electromagnetic radiation to the diffraction angle and the lattice spacing. D here is the lattice spacing between these two planes. Interplanar spacing between these two planes, and that is also related to the lattice parameter. Then these diffracted X-rays are then detected, processed, and counted. So we get XRD data in the form of intensity versus 2. Then knowing the 2 theta values and lambda as we already know, so we can calculate the D spacing, and afterwards we can also calculate the crystallized size. Let's have a look at the pattern that I obtained for my sample. Here it is. This is how the XRD pattern look like. On y-axis, we have intensity, and on the x-axis, we have 2 theta values. We index this XRD peaks and get to know which planes are responsible for diffraction in our sample. Because as I mentioned in the Bragg's law, 2D equals to 2D sin theta equals to n lambda. So not all the planes will be responsible for all wavelengths, and because the orientation of different plane is different. So if you are giving an incident X-ray in a particular direction, you cannot say that every plane present in the crystal will be responsible for the diffraction. So to find out which planes are responsible, this we do from the XRD data. Here we index these planes. As you can see in the above peaks, I have written the Miller indices of these planes. So Miller indices are just used to define the planes actually. Now we index the XRD peaks and get to know which planes are responsible. Then we find FWHM. What is it? It is full width at half maxima. For each peak, we find, suppose this is the peak 101, first one. So at half of the maximum intensity, we take how much width is this, and this is what is FWHM. Why are we calculating this? I will tell you later. Just a minute. So because we have to use there can be actually many methods for the XRD, but what we generally use for powder crystalline sample is the Debye-Scherrer formula that we obtain for a powdered crystalline sample. So how is it? This is the Debye-Scherrer formula for the crystallite size. And the next one is for the lattice strain. Let's focus on the first one. Lambda is the wavelength of the X-rays, which is a nanometer. We can also write in Armstrong. Or beta is the FWHM of X-ray diffraction peaks, which is in radians. Then cos of theta. What's this theta that we obtained previously from these two theta values? The corresponding theta to every peak. And then we will put it here in this formula and find the crystallite size. Then we will find what is the average of this crystallite size. Okay, so here 4.7 nanometer is the average crystallite size, which was obtained for TiO2 quantum dots. You can already see how small it is, the nanometer range. So we have used another characterization technique, which is scanning electron microscopy. Let me move towards that also. Here it is. So what is this? Electron microscopes, we already know. Light microscopes, we already know, we have used. Then electron microscopes use electrons for imaging. The process is in a similar way, kind of similar, that the light microscope use visible light. Since the wavelength of electrons is much smaller than that of light, so the resolution of SEM, that is scanning electron microscope, is superior to that of the light microscope. Let's have a look at the diagram. Here it is having electron gun, which is producing this electron beam. This is a cathode, it's the anode, which is accelerating it. It is electromagnetic lens, which is used just for focusing, and then scanning coils to raster the beams. Then we have the detectors. There are two types of detectors here, as you can already see. One is for the backscattered electron detector and the secondary electron detector. And here we have the sample. Okay. So after this incident electron beam interacts with the sample, they are scattered. And here here we are having two kind of detector used for those scattered beams. So in case of scanning electron microscope, the two type of electrons used for the imaging are backscattered electrons and the secondary electrons. Now the backscattered electrons belong to the primary electron beam, and they are reflected back after elastic interaction between the beam and the sample. And whereas by contrast, secondary electrons originate from the atoms of the sample. They are a result of inelastic interaction between the electron beam and the sample. Now, because the backscattered electrons come from a deeper region of the sample, and whereas the secondary electrons, they originate from the surface regions. So two of them carry different types of information. Backscattered images show high sensitivity to differences in atomic number. Means what information it will give? It will give which are the materials, which are the elements present on that sample, because it's sensitive towards atomic number. So, and secondary electrons imaging provides detailed surface information. Okay, so this is, let me go. Yes, this is it. This is the SEM and EDX image. We can see that homogeneous particles are present by these by this the SEM image. First one, we can say A1. Now, what is this B and C1? What is this telling? The EDX and elemental mapping confirms the presence of titanium and oxygen. Okay, so as I mentioned in this table also, and how much weight percent or atomic percent of both is present. So it is also an we can say application of the SEM that we can find which elements are present. So actually, that is it. Um, yes, there was much more to it, but I chose to kept it as simple as possible because because I actually wanted all you to enjoy this session and comprehend instantly rather than being lost in the complicated concepts at this initial stage. I know most of you are neither aware of right now of the nano and these techniques. Even the solid state is in the third year, I think, for the so maybe it would be a little difficult. I tried my best to give you a basic knowledge. So thank you all for your patience. I hope you all enjoyed it.
Yeah. किसी को क्वेश्चंस पूछने हैं? Any one of you?
Yes, please.
Yes.
If anyone is having any question, they can ask.
Any one of you?
And even if you wish to contact me at a later stage regarding any type of guidance which you think I am capable of providing, so you can get my contact info. I would be very happy to do that.
Hello, ma'am. Can you please tell us about internship which you have done in under in your BSc?
Okay, okay. Actually, in my second year, I did an internship in IIT BHU only. It was under, ma'am, you would be knowing her, Shal Upadhyay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, she was also the alumni of this institute. So I completed under her guidance only. It was based on the, since I was actually, as you are here in the second year, I was also there. I was also completely unaware of solid states, these experimental techniques, what is XRD, what is this all about. So when I went there, ma'am was like, अभी तो आप बहुत छोटे हो तो तो पहले थोड़ा लिटरेचर सर्वे था. So initially I did a literature survey. So I learned the basics of this crystallography, and in the last, actually in the 2 3 weeks, I did the synthesis and characterization only of the perovskites. So his a scholar helped me with Upendra sir. He helped me a lot through it. But it's always good to have something like this because I know that I developed my interest from there only. That was the starting point from where I developed the interest toward experimental physics, toward the experimental research. So if you, I would request you to get such opportunities. It's very helpful. Maybe today we don't realize that okay, what it's there to have a certificate and all, but it's very helpful, to be honest, because what we gain as an experience is what matters. It's not that okay, I'm new, I don't understand these things. Unless and until you step into it, you won't be able to do any time. There's no such the right time or after my graduation I'll do in post graduation. No, if you get an opportunity, actually better is to grab an opportunity, approach the professors, decide an institute, not only in ITBHU, you can try any other way, any institutes. Because I even applied somewhere in my PG after the final year. I was unable to join, but yes, I had applied a few. You can apply, you can search for the profiles of the professor whose interest match with your interest. So you can mail them, or you can see if there is any formal procedure for that institute. So you can search for that and then mail them, put your CV, put your interest, And I don't think most of the time, and just one problem comes that maybe he or she is having enough internship students. Other than this, I don't think professors deny you. They are always happy to welcome students. So
Yes.
it's just that we are hesitating. So if you, I think you should try. Even in the second year also, you are sufficient to do an internship. You know that much.
Yes. Thank you, Akshita. This is excellent thing which you have said. और मुझे लगता है मैं तो बच्चों को मोटिवेट करती हूँ मगर उनकी दीदी कहेंगी तो उनको ज्यादा समझ में आएगा कि बच्चों को टीचर से ज्यादा दीदियों की बात मतलब अपने सीनियर्स की बात समझ में आती है। जया, तुम चैट में क्वेश्चन पूछ रही हो, तुम उसको अनम्यूट करके पूछो यहाँ पे। Why to ask in chat? Unmute yourself and ask here. Jaya?
Uh, Thank you, ma'am.
Hmm.
दीदी, my question was, what is sub room temperature? SRT अभी आपने बोला ना, वो मेरे को clarify कर दीजिए।
Where?
Sub room temperature somewhere you said, na?
No. I don't
Jaya,
think so.
in which line you are talking about? With reference to
Ma'am,
what?
sub-room temperature, like I read it related to quantum dots. I was reading a research paper, there it was. So I got confused. Like I searched for sub-room temperature, but there were no relatable information that was coming. So she is already into the research. So I asked the question
Okay,
that
okay,
what
okay.
is sub-
It's just saying that ambient temperature, room temperature. There's nothing specific about it.
Hmm.
Ma'am, it's Aishwarya here.
Yes.
Ma'am, I had a
Yes.
question.
Hmm.
Ma'am, for the students who are in chemistry
Hmm.
as honors and have biology subjects in combination, can they pursue nanoscience in future?
Of course, they can
They
pursue.
can, of course. Yeah.
I told you in the beginning, it is an interdisciplinary field. Let me tell you, right now I am in the PhD scholar at Center for Nanotechnology. Anushka told. So there, not I am the only physics student. To your surprise, but I am the only physics scholar this year. So there are chemistry students, there are biotechnology students, there are material science students. So it's a diverse field. Of course, you can pursue.
Okay,
We
thank
all
you,
do the
ma'am.
same thing only.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, what is the up to what extent the role of chemistry is important in the research field in physics?
See, that depends on which field you are choosing in physics. In physics, not every experiment or research proposal is related to chemistry, but yes, somewhere it is. Uh, to share my experience, I don't have any experience of chemistry after my 12th. I even didn't have chemistry in undergraduation also. And where I joined, so my supervisor is from chemical engineering department. Initially, I was like, sir, will I be able to do it? Because I don't have any background. And it was him that he told me, no, there's nothing like that. You will study a common thing, and it's always relatable. And I think after a time, you become mature enough to deal with the new things. You always have to accept new things. You can't only rely on the basic things we see in physics as in we were in class 12. So I don't think there's any foundation. If you even if you don't even if you understand chemistry, it's very good. Even if you don't understand chemistry, it's fine. You will be able to do it. Just you should be prepared for the new things to learn new things. And as a researcher, I think this is the basic thing, because no one ever is having the complete knowledge. We all are in the same boat struggling to get something. So that's all.
It is not at
Okay.
your level, Akshita, ki, when the students are going for PhD or anything else. Even at our level, at the age of 60 years, I can say, until unless we are ready to learn new things, we can't do anything. No?
Yes, ma'am.
The research means doing something new. That means you should be ready to learn new things, get some information from there and apply it. So you should be ready. So that's a very beautiful sentence you said,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
very beautiful, means important information which you have given to the student. Yes, anyone next?
Didi, what was your subject
Ma'am,
combination when you were in your undergraduate here, like
I
in
was having a PMGR combination, physics, maths, along with geography. That's why I didn't have the background of chemistry in my undergraduation.
Ma'am, as you mentioned that you had no
Mhm.
chemistry background, but you got into it. So can we do the same with physics?
Yes, of course. Let me tell you where I am pursuing PhD right now. We have to take some courses as part of our coursework. One of the paper I'm having is physics of nanomaterials. Okay, and so just think that the candidate who are from different background, from chemistry, material, biotechnology, they are also reading that. They are being taught. So if you are entering an interdisciplinary field, you will you will have to know everything and you will get to know. It's not that difficult because you're prepared in that way. So no problem. And I think someone is asking Achal. Achal, I pursued my MSc from BHU only, from Banaras Hindu University only.
Anyone else? किसी को और कुछ पूछना है?
Didi,
Are
can
you
you
quantum?
brief us?
Yes, Jaya, first you ask, then Falak.
Uh, Didi, can you brief us your journey till IIT Roorkee, like from after MSc till IIT Roorkee? How did you get there and what was the procedure you
Okay.
followed?
Yes. Let me tell you. Actually, after my PG, I cleared the GATE exam, and through that only I joined PhD at IIT Roorkee. Most of the because I was well prepared that okay, I have to do research in this field, or it will be material science, means related to condensed matter or something, or whether through that way or through direct nano department. So, and I decided initially, let me tell you, after the my GATE exams were over and results were there. So I decided, okay, now which you have to just find it out which colleges you want to, means which institutes you want to go, sort them out, search for the profiles, whether professors in that institute are working, whether research positions under them are vacant. If they are vacant through CSIR or through MHRD also. So these are some of the factors you should already prepare for, because when you will be filling the forms and preparing for interviews, it won't be easy. So in this should be done before that. So I was actually prepared that okay, I have to work in nano, in energy, or it can be so okay, if not I didn't get opportunity, then I would have been working in condensed matter. But since I got that opportunity, so I just rushed into it. I had some other opportunities also from in physics department and then material science department, but it depends on your interest. So after applying to these institutes, we see, look, some of the institutes have the eligibility criteria. Mostly it's that okay, you are having an MSc or MTech and you have cleared GATE, so you are eligible. But after that, after you fill the form, they publish a cutoff list or shortlisting list. So please try your best to have a good rank. Not only qualifying, have a good rank. Because on qualifying you can apply, but having a good rank will help you secure a place in the shortlisting. Then you are called for interview. Uh, in the this year actually it was COVID time, so we had an online interview. Otherwise, you will have to appear offline, maybe. So interview process is simple. Basically, they ask from first of all they ask you to introduce. Okay, tell what you want to say about yourself, and on the basis what you say, what's your specialization, what's your dissertation interest, and in which department you applied. So the questions are from that only. And let me tell you, questions are basic. Sometimes we are like, oh God, I don't even know this. You don't realize. But I would say that appear for interview, appear for as many interview as possible. That gives you an experience and questions which people have. I was also very afraid that what type of questions will be there. But if you prepare for a competitive exam, conceptually, you won't face problem because that's what they ask. The experiments that we do in our undergraduation also, not from only post graduations. I have been asked the experiments of what I did in my undergraduate lab. So generally, students don't take laboratory seriously. Okay, in the UP, but take your time, study on your experiment, understand them not only for your semester exams, they are beneficial for the future also. So give time to that. Ma'am was always focusing on please do lab and then this much time. It's very important because I asked and most of the questions are written also you have it and questions from this field and that's it. One more thing that I would like to share that even you can find the joint doctoral program degree program at various IITs. In it, you are supposed to work for different time period in both the collaborated institute, one Indian and another in foreign. I can't mention about each one separately, but you can definitely check for some. IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi, IIT Roorkee, IIT Madras, IIT Hyderabad. There are various available projects that you can find the one of your interest and the eligibility sometime somewhere there's a CGPA requirement of 8.5. So try to maintain that also because we never know when it will be required. So just maintain it and go for it.
Thanks, Akshita. And I'm really happy. Your presentation was also very means what I expect from the speaker. Thankful. I'm really thankful to you. You told the things. You have taken
Thank you,
the
ma'am.
names of the uh, good experiments which are used at the research level, and you have slowly explained that how you get the information from those experiments. uh, of course they are very young and they don't know the things, but they have an habit of going through it on YouTube. I always put it on YouTube na. So they have an habit of going there and then watching it again and again, and I really think that they will get some information from some good understanding of the nanoscience from there. I asked them to ask questions from here, but they are little bit shy. Still, they are not that much open, maybe undergraduate students, but hopefully. And I'm really thankful to you. Anushka, do you have to say anything? Anushka?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So
Yes,
if nobody has any other question, then you please
Ma'am, sorry, your
say
voice is breaking.
yes, both my network is also very poor. I think I was just saying, thanking you that you did it. Means what I was expecting from a speaker, you explained the things in the same manner. You have taken them up to the research level and still maintained the basics. I hope that while watching your YouTube videos, they will be able to get a good understanding of this field. That I really appreciate your talk. It was really good. मेरी प्यारी बच्ची थी तो देखो मैं इसने तुमने वैसा ही प्यारा सा प्रेजेंटेशन भी दिया. I should accept this in the simple words.
Ma'am,
Yes. हाँ, yes, Anushka.
ma'am, ma'am, from where colors come in quantum dots?
अच्छा, you are asking to अक्षिता. अक्षिता का शायद डिस्कनेक्ट हो गया. I feel so. अक्षिता, are you there? Akshita, she has disconnected her. network. She is having some network issue. It's raining everywhere, na? So yeah, Akshita, they are asking about the color. Yes, please repeat your question. Who was asking?
Ma'am, from where does the color come in quantum dots? Ma'am, you are not audible.
Akshita, you are not audible.
Okay, sorry. Color comes from where the color comes. It comes from. It depends on the band gap. What is the whatever is the band gap means the difference between the conduction band and the valence band. Example, from there it determines what color it will emit. So that's it.
If no other question, then Anushka, please.
Ma'am,
Thank you, Akshita ma'am,
Yes.
for
ma'am, like Akshita ma'am said that means there is sometimes the requirement of CGPA of a certain means there is a certain cutoff of the CGPA. Ma'am, but when it comes to CGPA, we know that it is quite subjective because in some universities it might be easier to score, and sometimes it may be tough, a bit tough more than others to score it. So, ma'am, in that range, that doesn't define us that we don't work hard or anything, ma'am. I think you understand what I want to say is that if we are in 7 or 7.8 or 7.5 CGPA as well, then we also work that well. But in some other subjects, it is somewhat a little easier to score, or even in some universities and that. So, ma'am, how much does the CGPA affect when it comes to an interview or whatever in the selection procedure?
May I respond to it?
Yes, Akshita, they are asking you, not me.
Yes. Okay. So let me tell you. Yes, I mentioned about CGPA, but here I mentioned if you want to do a joint doctoral degree program. Okay. So there I saw okay a minimum CGPA requirement, and that also I saw in one institute. So it's not that if you're not having a 8.5 CGPA, then you won't be able to pursue PhD from a good institute. You're always able to pursue. But yes, some there are some criterias. So you just have to find it out that where you are eligible. And I'm pretty much sure there are a lot of institutes. And even if you are talking about Indian institutes, means IITs, there also I've applied to many, and I came across that one or two institutes only they are having this requirement. Okay, we will consider your undergraduate and post graduation CGPA for the shortlisting. Otherwise, it wasn't a problem anywhere. So just your whatever is your rank and performance on the competitive exam, and how is your interview. So it's not that it's difficult and you won't be able to do that. But yes, I agree to it that you can think that it's not a good way, but still you have a lot of opportunities.
But actually, what happens now that when you try to sub institution, if they have a number of application is very large, then somewhere we have to put some criteria. Now, if the
Mm,
number,
mm,
how to judge the student. So
mm,
before going for the interview and etc., still for the interview, general criteria is 1:10. Means if there is one post, then call 10 students. That is the general, more or less general criteria for maximum interview based selection. So if you have numbers larger than that, then somewhere you have to put cut off marks. It is not like that that we always consider like this. Like in BHU, if you want to get admission, that after your credit, they give some marks for your high school. They have some marks out of 10, certain marks for your high school, whether your first division, second division, or what. Some marks for your inter, then BSc and MSc. You get some marks for having different class of divisions, means whether you are first division, second division, or third division. They don't take the marks itself, whether you are 8-pointer or 9-pointer, but they give a marks like this. So like this, every institution has some or other criteria, because the number of application is very large. And in that means it is something like that, that in IIT's JEE examination only 10,000 students are selected. It doesn't mean that in particular year only 10,000 brilliant students are there. There are many others. So that is not a criteria that if you have not selected in IIT, then you are a duffer. No, that's not. That's not the case. So like this also, sometimes getting the lower CGPA is not a certificate that you are a duffer. But yes, you should try to maintain a good CGPA. That's what Akshita wanted to confirm, that you have to try. And it is not only the institution or subject, it is sometimes I may give means bad marks, but maybe some other teacher is very liberal, he or she may give you a better marks. It also happens. It depends upon teacher to teacher also. So all this remains there. So you have to survive in that means frame.
Yes, actually, that only I wanted to mention that you should always try for better.
Try for better.
Means
That's all.
don't think that these are not considered. So why should I focus on these exams? Why should I focus on practicals? So you should not take them for granted. You should always try for better, and that only matters. There are a lot of opportunities. It's not that without 8.5 CGPA you won't be able to do something good. You're always able to do something good.
I have to ask a question.
Yes.
If someone is having a background in nanoscience and we don't have that, so we will be little back as compared to those who are having their background in that. So, sir, the how we can compare and how we can overcome out of it, and how what sites you have used that you said that you are not you are not having that background. So you will be preferring some sites or something other. So if you can please tell us.
Okay. See, I was having a nano background from my undergraduation only. In the third year, you will get an as an elective subject. So I chose that in the final year of my undergraduation. I chose nano then. Then in my post graduation also there was option for elective. Then also I chose nanoscience. So I didn't have that problem. But yes, there are people that if you're not having a proper nanoscience background until the post graduation, there can be some problem. But again, I will come to the same point. You can always learn because it's nothing really difficult. And even if you join PhD and you're not having that background, then also there's a coursework before your research work, and that is to prepare you. You will get to, and not I didn't follow any particular site. See, site depends on what topic you want to search and what information you want to get about what topic or something like that. So I don't use any particular site. I have a habit of opening 10 to 15 tabs simultaneously and scrolling through, okay, what is there and what is here, and okay, this one line is better here and this comparison is better here. So I do that, and I think it's good because how it means you shouldn't be dependent on only one particular source for your knowledge. You should be open to all the sources, but yes, be aware that there can be some misleadings. So don't follow just any source, but I think if you have to read papers and all, papers are always very beneficial. I will say, you would not understand the complete paper once you start reading at the initial stage. But what's in the introduction? What's the abstract part? Okay, what's the result? How it came? You won't be understanding in this one instant time. But something you will always gain. So try to read them if you are interested about a particular topic. And of course, good books are always available. You will find them. So that's the best thing.
Very good, Akshita. You said you are saying what actually I try to convey them, and when you are conveying them, it will be more impactful because seniors are always better than the teachers. The students always believe on seniors. If the senior is saying, then it is good. If the teacher is saying
It
that
is
they
fine.
are old people, they may be saying anything. But if the senior is saying that, that means because you are passing through that phase, na, so they believe more on you. Actually, the first line which Akshita said that you should be ready to learn new things. Go on reading the things and being a science student, you should always ask how, why, and if you find it illogical, then accept it. Otherwise, don't accept it. That's what I say. Always say in my first thermodynamics class. If I am teaching something, don't accept it. कि मैडम बोल रही है इसलिए maybe I am wrong. Maybe my knowledge is not up to the mark. You, if your logical brain accepts it, then it's good. Else, it is not good. So always learn new things and learn with awareness, not learning just कि हाँ पढ़ लिया उसको रट लिया कि यही सच है. Not in that way, na?
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, please. Yes.
Ma'am, please explain some of the applications based on quantum dots in chemical and biological field.
See, firstly, the one application that I was supposed to work, it was for the, I was going to use TiO2 quantum dots, which I prepared for the hydrogen storage purpose in MgH2. But you all know that it was a COVID time. I couldn't visit lab. So that's why I was unable to do so. But yes, and you asked about a biological application. I mentioned it that quantum dots are very useful in biofield because very simple. You can see that even they are used for the diagnosis and treatment in the cancer therapy. You know, they are nano robots and something like that. We attach a certain kind of drug to it. They are injected in our body, and then they release those drug at only the cancerous site. Means targeted drug delivery. So it's one of the basic things. Actually, ma'am, when I was introduced to nanoscience, it was by Professor Bhaskar, the final year, and he only told me this thing that think about this application, and I was like, "Sure, इतना भी हो सकता है?" So there is a lot of applications, and for chemical also you can say chemical means what means modifying the structure or a property of a certain compound. That is only chemical what I feel. So they can modify. They can modify the electrical property. They can modify the magnetic property. Even they can actually, as I told in electronics, they can use for faster and better circuits. So there are a lot of applications they can use to be to strengthen a particular type of materials. Okay, so that's in civil engineering they use it. Means to strengthen a particular type of materials. What's its ductility? How much strength it can bear? So these kind of applications are there.
Thank you, Akshita. Anushka? Anushka,
ma'am.
are you there? Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Akshita Di, for such an amazing and informative lecture and clearing our so many doubts. We are really grateful. And I express my gratitude to Neelam ma'am for providing this platform so that we can connect with our seniors. And thank you everyone for being a patient listener. Thank you so much.
One thing I want to say that this series of talk is especially meant for two purpose. One, आपको ये पता चल जाए कि आपके कौन सा सीनियर किस फील्ड में काम कर रहा है और आपकी एक बार उनसे फ्रेंडशिप हो जाए. और इसीलिए मैंने टेलीग्राम पे एक कॉमन ग्रुप बनाया हुआ है अब सीनियर्स को इंक्लूड करते हुए. So join that group also. So in future also, if you want to ask any question to any senior, you can ask there also. Na? So this series is specially meant for this, so that you get मीन्स काइंड ऑफ फ्रेंडशिप विद योर सीनियर्स इवन इन ऑनलाइन मोड, तो आप थोड़ा सा कंफर्टेबल हो जाए, उनसे बात कर ले तो आप उनसे आगे भी चीजें पूछ सके. थैंक यू अनुष्का फॉर होस्टिंग इट. थैंक यू अक्षिता, आई एम सो हैप्पी, मेरा संडे बन गया आज तुमसे बात करके.
That's
थैंक
my
यू वेरी
pleasure,
मच
ma'am.
बेटा.
Thank you.
थैंक यू वेरी मच बेटा.
Thank you, everyone.
थैंक यू. ओके ओके.